Hello, everyone. Good evening, good day here in Lis. We are recording on the 20th, the sharing for the 21st of February 2026. Today, we're going to deepen on the topic, Be Still. Many questions arrived that showed that it was very important to deepen a little bit more. We still feel that there's a field of exploration for this topic that is so important, as we will see today. We have a few questions that are already part of this subject. So let's go. Okay. In the public sharings like this one, there's always an interaction with the audience. So a few questions have arrived from previous sharings, and I'm going to give some attention today. And so a person is asking the following. In the video, do not wish to bury your own shadow. The person says, how can we recognize and embrace our own shadow without falling in guilt or in self-judgment? Transforming this inner encounter in a true path of growth, of spiritual growth, and maturing in faith. When we truly awaken to what we call spiritual path, it's a long trajectory, and generally it starts in previous lives, and in this time, even if for some it can represent an impulse that is a bit more stronger, it's a moment of synthesis. So we already have many lives walking in this search. The point is that the human nature, it is made up in a way that in each incarnation we lose memory. We do not remember of what lived in previous lives. Thus, we repeat experiences, and also our personality, it hides every time more that which it knows that it's going to expose it to a more definite transformation. So, technically, we know until today that who incarnates is the soul, that it's an inner nuclei in our inner world, and in each incarnation, it forms a personality, and at the same time is composed for what we call our bodies. And in the classical spiritual science, it's known that we have a permanent atom of each body that subsists in the incarnations, and in the following incarnation keeps a seed of the best of what we already lived, and a seed of its own evolutive process. Thus, in each incarnation, if it was such like a reset, a great opportunity brings within it everything that needs to be transforming, that needs to continue transforming, and needs to continue awakening as a potential of expression of we already acquired. So, in order for us not to fall into that trap of guilt or self-judgment, we have to go into a path that is called in the East as a path of acceptance and resignation. Acceptance, it's not to passively conform as a victim or in a negative way. Rather, to look at something as something good. So, for example, I am a meter, 85 meters. In this incarnation, this is how I am. If I do not accept that beforehand, and I start to fight or to battle to have another expression from that, then we're talking about something superficial here, but like a physical characteristic. But we can start a battle of not wanting to be, or wanting to be what we cannot be yet, or what we will never be in this incarnation, from that physical point of view. And innerly, we start debating or negating something from life itself. It's showing that is not anymore for us. So for that, we have to have humility. And this is a very intimate and inner work. So it's something that happens within us. And here, I'm going to go back to the work of Hercules, when he's rising the Hydra of Lerna. And it's exactly when Hercules, in the myth, he's going to deal with the subconscious, where it's all this process of shadow in us. And there, he sees the Hydra, and this Hydra has 7 heads. He intuitively identifies that is not going to help to fight with the Hydra, because he pulls ahead and 2 are born. So he gets the Hydra and rises it to the light and places it in a region outside of that human environment, terrain, material, as a symbol, no? And that starts losing its life, and he's able to fulfill his work. This analogy is that we can find those shadows that are many. We have to raise them up to our inner world. And here, we're going to be going into the topic of today, at Be Still. Because from that inner light, indirectly, it's going to be healing and giving a new dimension gradually to that influence or interference of the expression of that shadow in us. So this question about the guilt is important. Guilt only emerges when we haven't yet developed a certain level of responsibility. When we have a sense that we are responsible and consequential with our own initiatives, then we're not going to feel guilt. We may repent when eventually we haven't reached that what is our best expression of ourselves. And then we go into a path not of reconstruction, no, because it's something foreseen in this evolutive moment, an important question. So in the last sharing of Be Still, a person, in the first part, a person says that I mentioned the 8th of the 8th, and she would like to know if that new date, let's see, in the calendar, let's say, how does it work? Well, in the esoteric glossary, you can find a lot of information about the trimesters and its cycles. I have recorded a sharing about this cycle that we just came in the 8th of February, which is the cycle of fruiting. And we can eventually edit it because there are some features that are a little bit more inner to the work that we represent. And maybe we can broadcast it for the public. It's a very vast matter, but it's very essential. Or the essential point is that humanity started a migration from the law of karma in 1988. And from that, it moved from the law of karma to the law of the cycles. In the law of the cycles, they are divided in 4 trimesters. From the 8th of the 8th represents or means what we call the law of the hierarchy, the blooming of a cycle, where the seeds bloom. That is, everything that is evolutive in the universe that needs to develop is thrown in all the planes, even in the consciousness of humanity, and the 8th of the 8th is the beginning of that blooming of those seeds. We could, at some point, record a sharing just about the cycles so we can deepen in that matter that is so important. So somebody says and wants to know, how can we know what is our inspiration? What can we do with this acquired knowledge? I don't want to choose. Eventually, I want to be invited. See, this question, it's important because it shows a transition from a previous stage of humanity in which we were very passive in front of what was coming from above, or from the profound levels, as we choose to call it. But today, our inner world of humanity is being invited to assume its task in front of creation. And that naturally, it's a stage that takes into consideration all the preparation that we've had before. Because, for example, we're not going to take a key of a truck with 30 tons of load and place it in the hand of somebody who has never driven. This is an analogy, right? So, what comes for us today, amongst this cooperation with the evolutive plane, has been prepared for many, many lives, and also for our own experience in the universe. So from this purpose, that we be still from a certain perspective, we can gradually start to identify our next step, how to live it and to apply the acquired knowledge, serving the evolutive plan. There is a law, which is the law of service, and that is an intelligent law. All the superior laws are intelligent. What is an intelligent law? Is what activates or applies only when an evolutive code appears. So that's a very important key for us. Why? Because in a previous cycle, a lot of the constructive laws, but were not evolutive eventually, they could be manipulated and used also by beings who were not evolutive. So an intelligent law, as for example the law of service, it only becomes active and activates its full potential, which is to be linked with immaterial levels. That valve only opens when it's filtered by the superior intelligence. The law can be lived here and can be channeled for an evolutive process. This is a protection for us, so that our knowledge will not be used negatively. Can you follow me? That is a very important protection, very significant for our acquired knowledge, because everything that could have been shared with humanity could be used in a negative way, and then we will remain with a large karma in front of the universe. So this acts more in a material plane up to a certain point. However, spiritually and deeply, we have that level of protection, which is the intelligence of the spiritual law. So what do we do? The acquired knowledge. Do an offering in the plane that you can understand what is the evolutive plan, and ask for a signal, ask for an indication, ask for a dream, ask for life itself to show you what is. Because in general, our anxiety or the movement of our bodies does not allow us to listen deeply to our inner world. Because when we become still, why do we become still? Because something is agitated. It would not be out of context to say, that the hierarchy says, be still. What is agitated in us is that human part, our feelings, our energies. In the etheric plane, our metabolism agitates us a lot, a lot. And the involutive forces know this, and including what we eat today is all made up for agitating our bodies, for example. Our bodies are kept by our divas as well, by vibration, by a frequency. So our emotions, as we will see here in a question, the difference between emotions and feelings is an important question. Our thoughts, so many informations, impulses and arguments, polarization, everything takes us to a great agitation. So amongst this agitated environment, it's very difficult to identify that place of our place in creation is very difficult. We're not saying impossible, but it's almost impossible, because there's a lot of mixture, a lot of contradiction. We know that in the universe, in this universe where we are, is the universe of love and wisdom. Thus, everything works from the law of magnetism. So like attracts like. So if we generate a lot of concerns and disturbances, antagonisms, we will attract a vibration that is corresponding, and our acquired knowledge at a certain level is going to be mixed with all of this. And then we risk to throw ourselves into a great impulse that would be coming from a reaction, an impulsive reaction, that would not correspond to our deep knowledge. So ask for light about all of this, and you will be helped. In the sharing, something in us is unsatisfied and claims for a superior existence. So a person asks, when we establish a goal to come out of inertia, what happens with our inner being? What other impulses we receive, and from where do they come from? Okay, it appears that behind that question, there's a concern about the own inertia of the bodies. Inertia can be identified first as a law of matter, because matter tends to have an stability. In this sense, inertia becomes stability. For example, a chemical reaction comes to a point that reaches stability, and that's inertia, right? And from there, eventually, is not going to combine anymore. So it's an inertia. From that perspective, inertia is a certain point, almost, of indifference, almost indifference in certain cases, when after many impulses and many trials, the inner world withdraws a bit. So the soul has a program that comes from many lives. So it's a very vast program that we don't even have the least of the idea. And that's a good news, because we can open to that and discover a real life for us. And this life is going to communicate with the more external part of the incarnation as our personality really confirms its decisions. So we can make many vows with a lot of intentions, we can say a lot, but what we are living really, as we apply it in our life, not in the external life, as we live the values and principles that we truly understand, that we have made ours. So what decisions do we make from those values? So when we integrate those values, those principles, decisions, our life will be adjusting our karma so that we can live it with less obstacles. So that's taking us into a dynamism that's going to take us, as we said in the previous question, to the service to the evolutive plan. When there's a lot of distance between that and the life that we live, our own karma does not allow us to wear out all those values and principles with an external life, because the external life does not correspond in the vibration to those principles and values, and that energy stays withdrawn. So the result is that we feel the absence, we feel far away from that impulse that can be translated as inertia, as a difficulty to live all of that. So this is a very vast question, but maybe you need to ask yourself, what is my next step? How can I take all of this potential that I identify and place it in my life? And how can I come out of this place? Because no impulse will come if it's not authorized by our own inner world. Attention here. We can be in a sacred place. We already recorded a sharing about this. Remember? Garabandal, Montserrat, in between so many others. There's a special radiation of the superphysical life. And with my vibration and from the life that I live, that maybe cannot make a bridge with me, because I'm vibrating here and that is vibrating higher. So there's no communication between that with all its potential. So this is filtered by our own inner world, that many times our inner world does not allow us to receive a higher vibration to protect us. Why? Because if a superior impulse comes to me and starts to agitate our bodies because they perceive an energy that comes from a superior world, but our bodies are disorganized, that's not going to do any good for us. Do you understand? So that vibration comes to us, comes to our inner world, and our inner world starts calibrating that energy so that we don't get agitated by it. So the cosmic energy, the material energy, it's impersonal. It doesn't judge who is like this or like that. It finds a vibration, it finds a frequency, and according to a vibration that receives, it deepens that energy, it potentializes the presence of what is in us with the superior energy, or it's going to diminish a little bit the frequency so that we can remain okay there. because the superior energy is intelligent. Remember? It exists because it exists so that not to cause any type of disharmony in any environment and in any living being. So to answer here, what happens like magically in our inner world and the impulses that we receive. So when we are inert, our inner world cannot touch us. We have a great energy in the way that we make decisions. It's not just physical, it's emotional and mental as well. It's inertia in the way that we make decisions. So when we link this to the question of the cycles, since the humanity is already receiving this impulse through the cycles, or when the cycle gives an impulse, the tendency or the expectation, if that is, as we can say that in the superior universe, is that we can make a decision that will follow this impulse and interact with superior life so that we can come into the dynamism of what is to interact through service. So prayer is also a great service. So if we place ourselves to pray, for example, or to make any other spiritual exercise only for us and our own benefit, so the frequency comes down because the exercise was not done for that. The exercise is to intensify the frequency and to place us in contact with a praying channel which exists in the universe, is not only the formal prayer, and to generate a radiation from a different frequency which is not ours. And this is the same way that happens with all spiritual life. So with all these impulses, prayer, for example, meditation, here we have a question about meditation as well, all of that will take us to a condition of stillness, so that we can listen to that which is already inside of us. So the good news about all of this is that there is a change of paradigm of the spiritual searcher. It is not us who construct the superior vibration. We can create a condition so that which karmically or dharmically is in our path can come to encounter us. We attract that superior energy, and then a relationship is established. And this relationship is not a superficial relationship. It's a relationship that should become deeper, and we need to confirm it throughout time. So these nuclei and these spiritual points in us and in the supraphysical life of the planet gradually can count with us as a small point of light and radiation. Can you see? It's very different from somebody doing any type of spiritual exercise for my own benefit. And so you ask, so there would be no benefit for me? Of course, there would be a benefit, but it would not be or would not represent the spiritual search, which is the search of that alignment that we will finally can become one day a server, someone who's aligned with the deeper levels and in different ways, in silence or in radiation or speaking or in an action or through external service, can project the superior codes in a planet that is so worn out. That is the word. We are in the moment observing this. So here's another question. I have felt every time more the impulse of praying for those who have passed away. Is there today a need which is greater than before? First, yes, it's very important to pray for those souls. So understand well that the one who disincarnates or who dies is the soul, right? So the soul goes through intermediate planes of consciousness when it dies, and it's very helped to find, it can be very helped when the soul finds this channel of prayer, because it's a channel of elevation. When we die, we have to go through the astral plane, that is a plane that is very disturbed, very agitated, very hostile, and even violent, because it's very close to our external point of view on the physical plane. So there are souls that can take weeks to perceive that they have died, because it's very similar to the physical plane, and sometimes even worse. Why? because all the desires that were not realized on the physical plane, on the astral plane, the soul perceives that on that plane it can be realized. So it remains there because it still feels there would be a field of expression for those desires. And they get stuck there. So this is very important in our incarnation to give attention to our more subtle bodies, so that when we come out of the incarnation, which is also on the astral level, we can really move forwards to a level of renovation, which is a break in between the incarnations, and we can live an evolutive process and not to stay stuck repeating the experiences on the astral plane. So to pray for those who have died, yes, it's very important for this matter and for other reasons as well. For example, for the protection of that soul so that it cannot be absorbed by negative consciousness from a certain evolutive level that absorb the souls, and then they remain experimenting on the astral plane through those souls. So yes, it's very important to pray for those souls. The point here is eventually to not direct the prayer with a specific intention. Yes, let's pray for those who have passed away, millions and millions of souls, so that they may have protection, help, and so that they may live a process of healing. When we die, the consciousness are linked to the lineage of healers who receive us and harmonize our consciousness so that we can move forwards. And it's very important to pray for that situation, yes. Now, if it's more necessary than before, maybe yes, the planet lives a battle with the forces of involution, as we have seen before. So the astral plane, the mental plane especially, is very conflicted, extremely, with a lot of friction. So yes, it's more important because as the synthesis becomes closer to the human consciousness and of the planet, as we're seeing, it's almost like rushing in front of our eyes with the crisis and the situations that are becoming every time more complex, more interlinked. So the need is very great, yes. Here there's a question, an important question that I'm going to answer when we come into the topic of how to be still. And the person says, when a being transcends, even on a certain level, the spheres of the ego, how does he act? How are the mechanisms in the process of thought, feeling, and action? It's a very important question, this one, very important. How do we guide, or how are those processes? How do the bodies remain in front of the service to the world, to the collective, rather than just simply working for oneself? It's an important question to make in this transition. We need to come out of the sphere of the ego to a group sphere. Is it necessary the energy of the will? Or is it a natural process that happens as we offer to selfless service? The person already answered to that what it reflected. Why? Because ego exists and it will remain, it will never cease to exist. Because in our mechanism of today, in our structure, is as if this is how we can incarnate. So the point is that the exercise of selfishness, which when everything is turning around us and we feel disconnected from something that is greater than ourselves. In a few words is that our soul is not only a nucleus that has consciousness of this, but our soul is also a part of a group of souls. And so the groups, the family, society, all of it, the nations, and on the external plane represent levels of that expression of collectivity or of group life. So it is very important that we see how today all of that is being attacked, frontally attacked. And the subject of selfishness is fed because again the involutive forces are trying to keep the human consciousness from making or taking the next step, which is to awaken for the level of altruism, to level of selfless action. And then it starts to interact a bit more freely externally also with a superior life. We'll go back to that. A person asks, there is a need to dedicate a lot of time to meditation. Or can we just place the vehicles to the service to the plan? Does meditation help to free the memories, habits from the bodies? Well, there are some words on our spiritual glossary that can have a very ample meaning. So meditation is one of them. In our understanding, meditation is a state of consciousness in which we enter a place from a perspective of observation. And we really meditate as we can observe what's happening with us. So it's further than just an exercise in a certain time with a very specific practice. The specific practice helps us to have less interferences and to be more concentrated in that process. Now, each one, in its moment of its own search, has a past linked to a preparation for his or her spiritual work today. So meditation can be the beginning of a path. It can help us to maybe remember our going through those schools in India, in the East as a whole, and depending on the need of each one. Now, the state of consciousness is to take us to observe how we are, because if we can assume that state of meditation in our life, then meditation becomes something continuous. So, are we conscious of ourselves? So, did it come from our inner consciousness, or did it come from those thousands of interactions that we have day by day with technology, with the emotional reactions that we will see? From where do they come? So in this process, the pulverization of the impulses, as we will see today, that shatters this mirror that should be our human consciousness. And we become identified with what's coming from our inner world. So if I do not remain still, if I'm always restless, I am not going to be able to change my path. I will not be able to associate what is agitating me, and I may find that that's my search. Do you understand? So I think that my search is to go after impulses, after music, after messages, but I am not able to listen to my inner world. And when a message comes or a music comes to help me, I'm unable to keep a proportion of that with what I perceive in that moment, to make a breach from that what has been already been made within me. So I start contemplating yes, it's a very ample question. In a very meditative state, I can reorganize my memory, my cellular memory as well, if I place myself in a decision to observe what I'm thinking, feeling, and having as an initiative. From where does it come from? And naturally, from my subconscious, a lot of things will come out. If I'm going to deal with my subconscious every time that something comes out, then it's going to be difficult, because my subconscious has many elements from previous incarnations and it's going to be very wearing and very difficult to understand from where it comes from. So the point is, it emerged. Where does it come from? It's evolutive. Let's observe. Where is it taking me? If it's not evolutive, is it taking me to a self-affirmation of my ego? Is taking me for an action that is less positive? So let's observe as well. So let it detach from my consciousness. Let it go through. Let it pass. That point is that if emerges, starts to take me with, together with all my desires, my thoughts, my intentions, and when I realize I am far away from my spiritual search. So meditation, just like prayer, are practices and exercises, states of consciousness, mainly, that should take us to the next step, which is vigilance, a state of vigilance. So we are in a healthy vigil in an inner permanent tension, and what pulls that cord is my aspiration. So my aspiration pushes that cord with superior life continuously, and everything that touches that cord generates that vigilance, that attention, that filter of discernment to perceive if I welcome that, if that is part of my path or not. Today, the great part of humanity is thrown from one side to the other without knowing where it comes from, where it goes to, with hundreds of impulses daily without making any synthesis. And in the midst of that agitation, it's very difficult, really, to keep a state of vigilance. Well, feeling or emotional reaction, are they the same thing? So we make a very practical exercise in this very moment. Let's observe yourselves. Observe yourself now. And when we listen to all of this and this question, did something in us react? A superior feeling emerged within us? So reaction, it is typical from the emotional plane. It's a reaction that comes from the impulse of something that happened around us. Not only around us physically, but around the life that we live, from what we participate and everything. There are human feelings, yes, that are feelings that have been created in this life. And there's an astral plane, the possibility of that body, that is a subtle body, to build what we call superior feelings. A superior feeling emerges when our inner world places life after life after life, the best experiences that represent our relationship with the universe. For example, gratitude, compassion, that has empathy with the path of compassion, comprehension, deep comprehension. All of those are superior feelings that permeate our astral body and gradually heal. And they give depth, creating a field of depth in our emotional body to stop us from being so reactive and emotional and impulsive. So emotional reaction is one thing, and feeling is another. The emotional reaction changes according to the impulse, right? Human relationships, in that it's very well known. No? So we emotionally react as the impulses change, and then sometimes we react completely different after 2 minutes. So it's not constant. Feeling is constant. It's a feeling that has been constructed within us from many lives even. So it's very intelligent to search that region inside of us where our true feelings are. To speak here about the night, an exercise before we go to bed, we will include a topic about feelings, but we will jump this part and we'll come to it later, okay? If we don't try to avoid that which agitates us, then we will have a lot of difficulty to conciliate what's happening in our inner world and what's happening with our own personality. And today, the battlefield of humanity is the mental plane especially, because we are a mental race in this moment. An Atlantic race that was an emotional race, but this race Aries is in the development of the mental plane. So the duality, the rational plane, doubts, arguments, concepts, all of it is very active. So in the midst of all this agitation, if we cannot find a place of stillness, we can be thrown into all of that, even if we have constructed in many lives before a certain knowledge, a certain adherence to that which is superior. Even if we are devout, we will be taken by this agitation because it's too strong. It's very strong and transports the force of the collective consciousness. And in that collective consciousness, a lot of forces of involution are polarized as chaos, dissociation, affliction, antagonism. They're all involutive forces, forces that do not know about cooperation. They only know chaos. They only know dissociation. In many of those particles, they also make up our bodies, because our bodies are a combination of a program from our soul, a determination from the lords of the karma, of our inheritance, genetically speaking, from the process of that permanent atom, and of all the atoms that in the process of our physical parents, our bodies were generated. So imagine the mixture of all of this. And who needs to, it's our soul that needs to say something about all of this, and our guardian angel are the only two states of consciousness that know what is behind all of that. So if we are excessively in touch with vibrations that are very dense frequencies, so when we arbitrarily are in touch with those, when we go, so there are two different things, right? When we are in touch with those dense energies and things when we go into what's dense to be of service. So when we're absorbing all those impulses, our filters, or that cord that is stretched, or the hand that stretches our cord, which is that inner vigilance, starts loosening. It starts lowering its level of strength in being able to filter all of this. At a certain point, we become common persons, common people externally. Innerly, our inner world is almost in anguish because it cannot project its vibration. You see? So that vibration is loose. Our cord, our food is loose. Our vibration became so contaminated with these intermediate filters, and at a certain point we have no more energy to sustain our inner search. So beyond sustaining our inner search, we cannot sustain the consequences of all of that. And eventually, we will become a representative of that inner light in the world. Remember what Jesus said. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. So we cannot bury that. We have to place our light in the place where it can be seen. So we have to discern what we come in contact with. And this agitation of the life of today does not allow us, to do that. So many can ask, okay, so how do I do it then? I, I stay 3 hours per day in a car in the middle of the traffic. We're talking about our consciousness. Where is our consciousness when we do all of that? If it was truly a karma and we didn't have an option, you will be helped in your consciousness, the in perspective, to be dealing with all of that. And in your deeper consciousness, you will be perfectly aligned with your inner world. And what's possible will happen in your case. The point is that we use the situation of the karma to justify our inertia and to not to move in direction to keep that cord stretched, to deep the tension of that cord. As much as we stretch that cord, we will feel the harmony and we will feel it more harmonious. It's an analogy. So the more we stretch that cord and we really become aligned over that positive tension, more tones in more profound ways, we will see who we are and what we radiate. In general, radiation is unconscious. It is not necessary to search for the consciousness of radiation. Our conscious task is to see, where is my consciousness in that stillness? Not to go into that collective restlessness. How is that process in me? This is making, or it's creating a battle within us, all of us incarnated. It's a true battle. And this is why we say that it's very important, the periods of the night, so that we can prepare for that moment that is so important, that takes up to the third, eventually, of our life. Maybe a little bit less than a third of our life, but it's a lot of time. Where is our consciousness in the moment of our sleep? We'll come back to it. Okay. If we will have or place more attention to our inner life, in the work of the Federation Fraternity through Association Mary, there was a compilation of messages that were published about inner life. Search for that. If we would be more attentive to our inner world, we would have a greater possibility to know what's happening with us. What is our inner world in this context of our soul? What our guardian angel, from where it comes, that light that is illuminating our path, that is bringing clarity for what we're living. To bring clarity does not mean to bring relief, because sometimes what we have to live, it's our learning. So when we try to rush in front of the trials and challenges to search for a relief, we eventually are negating the own hand of God sometimes. I don't know if you know, but there is a story where somebody was in a church and there was a flooding. So that person ran to the tower and said, "My God, help me." Then a helicopter came. No, help me. Helicopter, no, I'm searching for God. God, help me. So the helicopter left and the water continued rising. He continued asking for help. So then a ship arrived. No, my God, help me, God, help me. And he did not want to go into the ship. So the ship left. And water continued rising, and he died. When the moment of the trial, the help comes in the way that we need it, for the learning that we need. So that is very important. In parentheses, the time of trial, which is the moment where we are all in. Right now, we're all identifying with that learning. So we need to identify the learning which is behind that which we're living. So This is why be still has to do with an initiatic work. Do you remember when we worked with this process of initiation? If we have our intention that is seeing our inner world and everything that exists as superior, gradually all those energies are going to win the control, and its vibration will have more preponderance over the autonomy of the material vehicles. So if a trial or a challenge or the physical moment that we are going through is part of our learning, the superior energy will also come with it, so that it will contain the region of our bodies and will stop the bodies from wanting to live that artificially. Because if we want to come out of something artificially, we can lose. We can lose the learning, and then we artificially come out of it, and we will find the same trial, or even with stronger in a different situation, because we did not understand the trial that we were going through. That's important for any type of concern, including illnesses, parallel to everything that needs to be made. Of course, we are not saying that we don't need to find ways of lowering the suffering. That's not needed. But if this reflection is not accompanied by the stillness, then the arguments or understanding are not going to be enough. Is the symbol, or what is the meaning that is the deep between our consciousness, our deep consciousness, and the universe? Nobody's going to say that to us. There's an attribute that is linked to the healing that says renounce to interfere with the evolution of others. So do not insist in giving answers to something that does not correspond to us. A healer, he is somebody who adjusts the frequencies and helps to reconstruct the frequency, the tone of the frequency. He is not the owner of the frequency, and he's not the owner of the frequency that the other one is manifesting. It's something so subtle to manifest, no? In comes to, for example, medicine, right? So if we are going from one side to the other, between agitation and searching for stillness, if we don't stop more in the stillness, and when we oscillate and we get in touch again with agitation, we let it go through, we let it pass, we will have a lot of difficulty to stabilize our consciousness in what we're truly doing here. We're going to have a lot of difficulty. And any impulse that oscillates from what we are more used to is going to bring us even to question us if we are on the right path. Did you live that already? Comes, a stronger wind comes, a turn, which is a little bit more, and we are holding the steering wheel before we actually turn with the car, no? So it's so important to be still. It's something that in this time is so important, that even if it has a different language or a different presentation that appears to bring us to religious groups, it's not. It's called the grace of state. It does not matter what type of spiritual life in the past we have had in other lives or in this one. Humanly, we can always reach a certain point. We are conditioned by the limitations of the incarnation, of the limitations of the condition of the planet as well. So, for an evolutive impulse to exist truly in this context, the evolutive impulse that comes from a different region and that eventually will use a certain space or something or someone to be manifested, it's necessary to have the grace of state. This grace of state comes when we did our part, like the sacred books say. The ship, it is part of the embarkation. The sails, the oars, the cord, the ropes, they are all part. Now, the wind blows where it likes. So nobody is going to determine a grace of state. We create the condition for that intelligence of superior life. And when the moment, and if it is the moment, we'll start to serve. And attention, this in general happens in our unconscious, and an energy will come to us and will start reaching us, which is the grace of state, is a special grace, is a special radiation of the universe that for some reason may be built over many cycles of the universe and from other incarnations, makes use of this positive karma, uses this space to radiate there a state of consciousness, an energy, a situation, and then we start to serve. Now, if we are not in that space of stillness, that is impossible. It's impossible because first, we can get confuse the grace of state with an individual merit, because the grace of state is not something that we can say that is an own individual conquest. So you perceive the difference? It's more subtle. There's a difference there. So the part of the learning from the disciple is part of that path. The path of whom is forming to truly be a server of the evolutive plan. It's a long path, you know, but this path has been traversed over lives, many lives. So the point is, do we truly want to re-encounter where we already walked and bring it to the present moment? Or we will make it into a karma that with our trials of the spiritual ego will fall once and again. So we'll try to find our own human merits. We'll try to control. So that all that is part of the preparation in which the majority of the searchers already lived in a previous life. So this be still of today, the impulse of today is to not go into the agitation that stops us to coming into that place within us. Because when we reach that point, and each one of us reaches that point, you will see how the vibration is different. And maybe you will be able to understand the difference. You see, we reach that when the wind wants, in this analogy. Suddenly we feel an alignment, something that establishes there, and we know that we, on a certain level, Jesus would have said, live in this world without being part of this world. And we know together that we are not the ones who built this, because we don't even know how we reached that state. You see, purity. Now, if we do not become still, in that aspect of our own human will, then there's nothing spiritual that can resolve this. This is why the search of meditation, of prayer, of consecrated life, of service, all of that is linked directly with the matter of human will and superior will. If we do not come in the symbol, which is now we're coming into Lent, which is very appropriate symbol. At a certain point, Jesus walked into the orchard of Gethsemane, right? To live what? A festivity? No, he came in to live an agony. And that is the key, the law that he gave us. May your will be done and not my will. So this is very important for us to deepen in all of this, because if we do not become still, our human will, if our human will doesn't get quietened, then the self-affirmation of our human personality, that sometimes eventually even genuinely is born from experiences that were not concluded in our evolutive program. And at the end of the time, everything will come together, you see? Everything, one on top of the other. So we have to learn to discern. Yes, because something is still incomplete within me. I'm talking about an experience. But sometimes that grace of state, I am able to recognize and identify that there is an open door for something different, for something superior, that at the same time activates what? That I need to renounce to something. I need to renounce to that personal experience because otherwise the other evolutionary experience is not going to happen. The two things are not going to happen at the same time, you see, not at the same level. So when we become still, the dialogue between those two wills starts refining. So our human will, if it's concentrated in the personality and it is really searching the soul and what is superior inside and outside of us, that will become aligned. And I will feel in this alignment an automatic peacefulness, independent of the state, if I'm in the middle of the traffic, or if I'm in the middle of Sao Paulo, or at the mountain alone. Now, some people say they go to Himalaya and they pay a fortune to go there, but the mind of the person never stopped. And so the person came back and nothing happened because it's not an external process. So the conditions help a lot, yes, but the condition is our consciousness. So this is why the sharings are to awaken and to expand the consciousness. So this stillness is so that our human will go aligning with what is superior, and that we learn that in the hierarchy of the universe of life, we need to learn to wait. There is a moment for everything. We need to understand that definitely. There is a moment for everything. And the wind will blow wherever it wishes. So, is this inertia? No. Prepare your ship. Put everything in order. Raise the sails. Place all the ropes in order. And stay vigilant to the wind. So we are about to finish. And we have just the last topic about our dreaming. Today, with technology, most likely, all of us, we remain until the moment when we're going to sleep with technology in our hands. And the luminosity of technology promotes that in our nervous system, a type of stimuli that it does not stop when we turn out our cellular phone. It continues generating a friction in our nervous system, searching for something to keep alive because it's not a natural light. So it remains searching to keep alive within us. So I recommend that, and of course this needs discipline, decision, and to establish priorities. If I am going to take care of myself correctly, if I'm going to the greatest possible attention to my ship, no, we can apply this, or I'm going to leave my ship in the sea with everyone else, and have the pretension that when I pray, meditate, or I do any spiritual practice, something's going to happen that is really consolidating my consciousness. You see, life is a continuum. So it's not only during the moment of the spiritual exercise. So if I am in between an activity or in another activity, in between those moments, I will creating a logic that is evolutive and constructive, and will have more possibilities to stabilize my consciousness in that place of quietness that will accompany my inner life and confirm my vows in my life in a specific moment, and eventually be considered for that grace of state to reflect in a certain way about the trajectory of the ship and where it needs to go in this analogy, and to serve this world, this universe, that is so much in need. So this is a very short exercise that we can do before we sleep. And eventually we may, we need to stop any impulsive movements. So it's not something like, okay, we're not saying that we do not use technology for certain minutes before I go to sleep. No. In general, it's before we go to bed. So it's not good to create anything artificial. So we place ourselves a day after the other to create a space, a moment when we leave behind the technology and we create a condition that we will be with ourselves before we go to bed. So first, it will help us to renounce, to keep searching for impulses that are superficial, that does not correspond to us, which we always end up happening, no? That everything then comes to our sleep. And then I remain sleeping about or dreaming about things that have nothing to do with my evolutive process. And because just before I went to bed, I kept with that technology in our hands. So how do we turn our sleep into something evolutive? So there's an exercise that is very simple that can help us. Without trying to control the process, we disconnect. So we disconnect a little bit more time than before. So every time a little bit more, a little bit more. We increase the time of our disconnection every day. And we place in front of our mental screen and we ask ourselves, what colors emerge in our consciousness? And we observe. And we simply observe. We don't place any intention like saying, oh, I like so much yellow, and then it's yellow. No. This is an exercise. So here's a training also of neutrality and to allow our inner world to communicate with us, and especially the astral plane. Why? Because colors are born in the astral plane. So the fire of space, and one day we'll study about this, generates particles, igneous, that condense, and when come through the astral plane, it generates the colors. Infinite tones and breadths. So when I close my eye, what color shows itself? If there are many colors, it's not a problem. Stay in front of the colors. It's not easy, eh? You will see. So we start to do that, and then a thought comes in, and then I remember what I saw on YouTube, and I remember whatever else anybody said. So you will start perceive the interferences of that which we renounced. So we come back to the colors, and that stabilizes. In a certain way, we let it there, we stay in silence, and we'll see if another layer of colors come, until we feel that a color emerges with certain levels of tones. And that's the signal that we have come out of the mind and we have gone into the intuitive plane. And so observe the exercise. What colors emerge when it stabilizes, and we let it aside until the second stage, until we feel that there's only color establishes with certain tones. And that shows us a possibility to make it easier for consciousness to detach from the intermediate planes, the etheric, astral, and mental, and it can restore our more deep sleep from the evolutive plan and from the intuitive plane. And do this experience and then tell us how it went. And here we're going to finish by giving an advice from the Irdin publisher, which is a very important advertisement. We are in front of a month before we do the launching of the Book of St. Joseph, which will be on the 19th of March in Figueira. And the important information from Irdin Press. The pre-sale of the book entitled From Origin to Origin was extended until the 1st of March. We give thanks to all of those who already bought their book. In the screen, you are seeing the book. And we would like to invite all of you who is watching us, if you are interested in this work, that you may also acquire your print. This is an opportunity that you can buy ahead of time and also help us in making possible for us to publish this edition, which has been prepared for many years with a lot of care and a lot of dedication. The book was revised firsthand by Trigueirinho, accompanying the process of Sister Lucia. So the book is very important, is a different book, because in a certain moment we will start a cycle of deepening with this important book, which is a public book for the whole of humanity, and very important again for all of us. Saint Joseph, he presents in this book as Saint Joseph. It is a consciousness who incarnated with us many times, as Saint Germain, for example, is a consciousness that was very known in the mystical world, in the spiritual world. In other expressions, it was the approximation of this great being who's Saint Joseph. It's a spiritual hierarchy that accompanies humanity from several centuries ago, and he lived incarnated in the human condition, so he knows very well these processes that we study here today. And surely, in this book, he will have many keys and many instructions with many examples of how he dealt with all of this while he was Saint Joseph, and certainly can help us. Next week, we will be in Spain, in Madrid. We will have a very important encounter, an encounter of charity and service that will have a service, a special activity with people in need. I will do a public sharing here in Madrid. We will record it and we will broadcast it for all of you. It will be done in Spanish, and in that way we'll continue with the expression of this work. Well, I give thanks to all of you. We will see ourselves in 15 days, our next sharing. Do this special work of becoming still, and do not forget to work your ship, right? The ship has to be in order for when the wind comes. Thank you, everybody.